Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I'm joined by author Matthew Lyons to talk about his latest novel, A Black and Endless Sky. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. It is a delight to be here.
I am happy to have you on. I finished reading the book a few weeks ago. I really liked it.
Thank you.
I love road trip novels and that paired with a possession story, and I love family dynamics, and this kind of being about two siblings stuck in a car was like up my alley. Totally.
I'm super glad.
Well, besides that, can you tell our listeners a little bit about Black and Endless Sky?
Sure. The way I've been, the elevator pitch version of it, it's very bad. I'll just go ahead and quantify it like that now. I've been describing it, I think, even as far back as I had the first idea for this book, I pitched it to my agent as The Blues Brothers meets The Exorcist,
Okay.
which, not so much the musical element, but like a sibling road trip sort of after a long estrangement gets waylaid by very supernatural and also terribly human circumstances. And it's sort of all about these two siblings, Jonah and Nell, who set off on a road trip from San Francisco to Albuquerque, and everything that happens along the way, most of it very bad, really bad for my characters. I'm not kind to them.
I could honestly see this as a musical. I'm like thinking at the different things. I'm like we could have a little number there. We could have a little number at the biker bar. I see it.
I dig it.
What part of the story came to you first?
There are a couple. I think I've been writing some, at least trying to write some version of this story for better part of a decade. I've had elements of it here and there, so it's been sitting in my head for a long time. But one of the things that sort of made me realize the story had wheels was the bar fight that happens relatively early on in the book. I had
Mm-hmm.
this image of this character just chucking a glass at somebody, and how that is both a terrible decision and a pretty decent way to get the upper hand in a bar fight. Um, Not that I have any experience with that, but that was sort of the first image that came to me for this incarnation of the story. Though there have been other parts of it, the hole in the middle of the desert, the sort of abandoned complex, kind of the I don't know, the industrial decay of the American West. A lot of it has been sort of swimming around in my head for a long time, and I finally figured out a way to make it all sort of stick together.
I can see that. I like all of those pieces coming together. Everything was happening. I was like, oh no. We learned different things about the characters and what tendencies they have. And Nell is like a doesn't take anything type of person. And I was like, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, she is deeply chaotic, but I love her very much.
Yeah, so the main story focuses, well, the main relationship of the story is between Nell and Jonah, the estranged siblings who are on this road trip. Do you have a sibling?
I do. I have a little sister. I would like to say that, I mean, I based some of this on my sister and I, but I really didn't. Primarily, the two main characters are elements of myself that I wanted to reconcile. And I figured, why not put them on a road trip, put them in a shitty Volvo and make them take a trip and see what happens. I truly didn't know how the story was going to end when I started plotting it out. Just, we're going to figure out what happens to these folks by the end of 300 some odd pages. No spoilers, of course. But yeah, I think it's more about me as a person coming to grips with myself and kind of coming to accept these two sort of sides of myself that have been at odds for a while. But yeah, I had my sister read the first 50 pages very early on, and she was super supportive and really understanding and encouraging of me to put as much of myself into these characters as possible. So, sort of nervous, but also a little chaotic.
Oh, that's cool. Well, you had her support.
Yeah.
So do you think the confined location of the car worked well to, I mean, I think it worked well to flesh out the characters, but also definitely ratchet up tension.
Yeah, I think so too. It was definitely a deliberate choice. I think like road trips. I'm a fan of pressure cooker stories. My first book,
Mm-hmm.
Night Will Find Us, was very much again about people sort of trapped in an exceptionally shit situation with no real hope for escape. Um, A Black and Endless Sky is a little bit more like escape doesn't look like escape, even when you do manage to get away from your problems. But the being in a car was a lot of fun, and those were some of the best times I had writing this book because it just got to write these characters kind of talking to each other, and it's a horror novel, so you want it to be scary, but I don't know. I think all writers just sort of love putting people in a room and seeing what they have to say. We're all narcissists. We're monsters, truly.
I mean, I think it works though to really get into the deep, things that these characters are going through, and without those scenes with these characters addressing their issues, other things don't hit as well. Yes, I really like that. And yeah, I definitely see the pressure cooker thing. So you not only have the growing tensions that they have from them not necessarily sniping at each other, but talking about things that the other person just doesn't want to talk about. And then you have the consequences of the bar fight, and then the supernatural consequences of the beginning. So it's a lot. It's a lot that they're going through.
A lot of baggage and a lot of problems that just sort of get piled on these two sort of unwitting idiots from the very
Yeah.
beginning. And I love them there, but they make very stupid decisions,
Oh
even
my
though those are the
gosh.
best decisions they are prepared to make. Mostly, Nell makes some questionable choices because she's just an immature asshole in a lot. I didn't ask if I could swear on this podcast. I'm going to go ahead and
You're
assume that
gone.
that's cool.
Yeah, you're fine.
Cool. Yeah, no, Mel's an immature asshole and makes some really terrible choices very early on in the book that end up kind of steering the book unwittingly for
Yeah.
the next rest of the novel.
I don't have a lot of moments where I feel like when I read books a thing she did at the bar that I was like, you definitely did that thing, and it's gonna haunt you.
I think I know what you're
So,
talking about.
but
Again,
yeah,
no spoilers, but like,
yeah,
oh, you have that moment of like, oh, you did this stupid thing, and that's going to bite you in the ass later.
yep.
And God, it does.
So I do also love all the body horror
Thank you.
in the book. How do you find a balance with how much gore you use in stories?
I mean, I love body horror. My favorite
Mm-hmm.
movie of all time is The Thing. Like John Carpenter is functionally a god, but also The Thing is a perfect movie. And that level of body horror, like there are writers who, like John Carpenter, use it to great effect. There are other writers who I think go a little far, which is a lot for me to say. That's a bold statement considering the amount of gross out shit that's in A Black and Endless Sky. But it's always a challenge to strain reader attention, to strain reader loyalty without snapping it, because body horror, unless you're down for it and unless you're expecting it, it can be kind of a revolting experience. It can be kind of sickening, which is part of the point, right? It's a horror novel. You want it to sort of not be expected.
Mm-hmm.
If you have somebody's teeth falling out or fingernails or whatever, like you don't want to see that coming a mile away. So it being unexpected but not, I don't know, grow like intentionally like bloodthirsty. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I think that without luxuriating in the violence but treating it as an element of the story is kind of how I strike that balance. But it's only so effective. There are some parts that even like people who I love and have read this book are like, that was too much. Why would you put that in a book? That's in my brain forever, and I'm mad at you. So, like, it's varying levels of success with body horror, but I'm happy with the level of bloodshed in the book because I personally don't think it goes too far, but I suppose if I did, I wouldn't have written it that way.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely brutal encounters that characters have with each other, but I mean, also just the consequences of the possession. I was like, the side effects of it.
Oh, yeah. This is like, hey, you have something eternal inside a very finite machine made of blood and bone. What's going to happen to that machine? It's not good. It's fun. I mean, it's good, but it's not pleasant. Let's say that. I feel like I'm dissuading people from reading this book.
Not on this podcast.
There. All right.
And the story is also told through different perspectives. As an author, is it fun to kind of embody different characters and voices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that even the two main characters, Nell and Jonah, are such different people, though they are very similar siblings. They're very similar to each other. But being able to solve narrative problems, let's say, through different characters is fantastic, and let the characters write the story. So, like, yeah, Nell's going to do some immature shit. Jonah's got anger problems. Terry, who comes in later in the book, is a frightening psychopath, and you can't really depend on him to be reasonable. And then you have another character who comes in after the first part, who she believes she has a higher calling, and she's self-righteous in everything she does. She's convinced of her own rightness in the world, and that is one of the most dangerous and terrifying things for any person. So being able to alternate between these different perspectives, I think, allows the writing to feel propulsive, feels self-congratulatory, but it keeps the story moving and also grounded in a human element, rather than the story writing the characters, letting the characters sort of be just people. So yeah, I enjoy that really, like, a lot, honestly.
And I think it's a very enjoyable as a reader too to get this story happening from all these different angles, and then kind of seeing how all of these things start coming together.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've always loved books like that. There are like it is a kind of an text in terms of like multiple narrators, but I read that probably way too young, but it had a huge effect on me because that's 1,000-page book, 1,200 pages, I think, that moves like nobody's business, because when a scene starts to flag or a scene is over, Stephen King just like switches. Like, okay, now we're talking about Bill Denbrough. Now we're talking about Henry Bowers. Now we're talking about Pennywise. Like, it's that narrative rule. Meanwhile, back at the farm, right?
Yeah.
You want to keep the story sort of moving, but you also want to let the characters as people have space to be who they are and show the audience, the reader, whoever, who they are, and give them a chance to identify, even if they are, like certain characters in this book, terrifying psychopaths.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about the fact that it is multiple perspectives, because I have a really hard time with chunky books, and I finished that, and I was like, yeah, that is why. Is because we're bouncing through all these different things going on, and it keeps it moving. Yeah,
I mean, but that's like Stephen King's superpower. He can make 1,200 pages feel like 200. It's
that's
wild.
true.
I have issues narratively with it. There's some crazy bullshit in there that I'm sure other people who are far
Yeah.
more well spoken than I have talked about at length. So we won't hijack this conversation toward that.
So if this ever gets adapted, do you have any like wish list, like casting choices?
Oh God. I mean, the person that I had in my head as I was writing Nell is Mackenzie Davis, um, from *Halt and Catch Fire*. She's on Station 11 now. She does fantastic work. Jonah, not so much, unless someone figures out a time machine in order to go back to 1992 and kidnap Nick Cave. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I have a dream casting. I can come up with like a dream like production company, like
Oh,
Spectre
cool.
Vision.
Okay.
Yeah, Spectre Vision is truly fantastic. Elijah Wood, fun actor, seemingly really nice guy, but what he does with Spectre Vision is incredible, and they do some of the most sort of artistic, weird ass horror in the game, and I love it unabashedly. So yeah, I feel like I kind of dodged your question there and asked a different one. Sorry about that.
No, just a broad adaptation wish list. Did they do his movie then Come to Daddy?
I think they did. I know
Okay.
that they have done. I think they did Come to Daddy, which was a weird.
Yeah, it
That was a
was.
wild. I intentionally learned nothing about that movie. I think that was the last movie I saw in theaters before the
Oh,
end of the world. Um, but yeah, I didn't know anything other than like Elijah Wood and Stephen McHattie are just going to be in this weird. And it turned out to be so much weirder and more intricate and weirdly heartfelt than I expected it to be. Y'all should watch Come to Daddy. It's so good and fucking bonkers.
yeah, it was a movie I watched. I think I was just folding laundry, and you watch it and you're like, okay, it's going to be this kind of movie. And then you're like, no, now it's this kind of movie. Now it's this kind of movie.
Right? It constantly moves the goalposts. Like it's like you're standing on a series of rugs that the movie's just constantly yanking out from under your feet. And you're not really sure when you're going to hit the floor, if you're going to hit the floor, but I don't know. It's an ambitious movie that manages to stick the landing, and I didn't expect that. So it was, yeah, I I could talk about that movie for too long.
So having written a, survival horror story and a kind of road trip possession novel, are there any other horror novels that you would like to write someday?
Oh, there's a ton. I
Yeah.
think that, all writers have like shit I've been meaning to write for a long time, right? Um, when I've been talking to friends and family about A Black and Endless Sky, I've been describing it as Blues Brothers meets The Exorcist, but also something that has been there since day one really is the fact that it is a horror story that's kind of car crashed into a crime thriller. And I love that. I love crime horror so much. It allows for, again, sort of momentum in the narrative and really interesting kind of colorful characters. So I'm really digging. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about kind of westerns and neo westerns. So I think my next one is going to be something along those lines. Again, sort of horror crashed directly into a crime story. It's going to be weird. This next one actually takes place in my home state of Colorado, which is the first time I've written anything full length about Colorado. And I've been trying to for years, but I finally have an idea that I'm really happy with. And yeah, I'm currently hard at work on that.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, I was gonna ask because the night will find us is like New Jersey Pine Barrens. This is like a road trip through the American Southwest. So next stop is Colorado.
Yep, there's a place in Colorado called the San Luis Valley, which is sort of the heart of all weirdness in Colorado. There's something like 60 active cults down there.
Oh,
Um,
I did not know
oh
this.
yeah, yeah, I could, yeah. There's a wild amount of supernatural stuff. I think the first reported livestock mutilations that are attributed to extraterrestrial life happened in the San Luis Valley. I think in the late 50s. But there's a lot of weird, funky stuff down there that I've been, and it's beautiful. And that's the other thing is it's weird, but it's gorgeous and stark, and this endless landscape underneath this like infinite like blue sky. It's stunning in its beauty and just super fucking strange. And I love it for both of those things. There's a place down there called the UFO Watchtower, which is exactly what it says on the tin. I have a coffee cup from there. I have a shot glass from there. I love the UFO Watchtower. Anybody who says otherwise is just wrong.
What is it? I mean, is it just like self-explanatory? It is just
Kind of self-explanatory. It's
okay.
basically a big stainless steel platform built in the middle of the desert where you just go to watch for UFOs, or at least they did. I think it's closed during the nights now. There's also a gift shop, which rules, but it's like 10 miles from anything. So it's just like this strange little like platform and geodesic dome in the middle of nowhere off the side of a lonely 2-lane blacktop. It's the coolest. I love it so much. People leave things sort of like memories and almost offerings. There's some it's a fantastic place. The San Luis Valley is super cool.
That does sound really cool. I was gonna ask, what is your personal relationship to horror?
Uh, I mean, that's sort of a long story. I started off reading Goosebumps like every good millennial. But horror never really clicked for me until I was high school. It was the first time I watched Evil Dead 2, which is about the goofiest origin story for any horror fan ever. But yeah, I rented Evil Dead 2 from my local video store. I watched it like 2 or 3 times in a row in one night because I'd never seen anything like it. And that was when I realized that horror can be kind of anything. It's not just like The Exorcist or The Shining. It's like, no, the horror can also be the Three Stooges, and do really well in that. So that was when I sort of saw what horror could do and in what capacity, and I never looked back. I always wanted to write horror, tried writing in a couple of different genres, found my way back to horror after a few years, writing short stories, and the rest is sort of history. That feels, again, self-congratulatory, but yeah, that's a very short Cliff's Notes version of it.
That's funny. I think you might be the first author to have started on Goosebumps. I think most people usually say like they stumbled upon like a Stephen King,
I mean, that's
like at
fair.
that. Yeah.
It was Goosebumps, and then it was just like there's nothing really between Goosebumps and Stephen King. I guess there's Christopher Pike, but
Yeah,
I was
that's
never really in. I didn't know about Christopher Pike until I met uh, my wife, who
mhm.
introduced me. You know, when we were in college at the time, but that should have been the stepping stone, because otherwise it was just like go from the Haunted Mask to The Shining, which is a fucking brutal jump. That is going from like, yep, this mask has ghosts, and then it's like, nope, you've always been the caretaker here, Mr. Torrance. It's like, I'm 12. I should not. That was the first time I'm like, I don't, is this too much for me? I kept reading, obviously, but
I have to know,
yeah,
but
I need to know where this goes. I just recognize that I'm out of my league at this point at 12.
yeah, I had a friend who had a lot of the Fear Street books and Christopher Pike books, and I would go hang out at her house and definitely just like try to speed read. I'm like, the beach party, like I have to know what happens. What is going on?
Did you watch the Fear Street movies?
Yes.
I loved them. I thought they were so fun.
Oh, they were fun. And I really liked the 1666. I didn't know what to think going into it, and I was like, I love this.
Yep. Yeah, because after the second one, you're like, what will the story be? What and then they come in with this third installment and kind of rewrites everything else that you saw up until that point. Really well done, man. I love those movies. I need to rewatch those.
I was just thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna rewatch
Yep.
those. Those were
Yeah,
fun.
hard same.
So like really good kills in the first one.
Yeah. And they leaned into sort of like the different tropes for the different like the different like time periods. So like the one set in 1996, I think it was 94.
Hmm.
Like it felt like a horror movie. It was designed to be a horror movie from 94, whereas like the one that was 74, 76, it felt like a Jason movie without Jason, which was dope. And then 1666 was just like upmarket, like witchcraft horror that we would have seen anytime over the past 8 years. Really well
Hmm.
done, but it all sort of flows together so well. So,
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with them. And then, yeah, Mike Flanagan is working on that new Christopher Pike
oh shit.
adaptation, like the Midnight Club, I want to say.
Oh
So now I got to read it.
yeah, I gotta read the Midnight Club as well. But like Mike Flanagan's doing a thing,
Yeah,
sign me up. Like
I know.
I'm not better than that. He's great in everything he does. Like Midnight Mass, I know some people weren't hot on. I loved it. So well done.
I really liked it. I think Haunting of Hill House is still like my top, just because again, I love like sibling, like dysfunctional family relationships. I love it. But Midnight Mass is right there.
Yeah. Bly Manor was interesting, but
The thing is, yeah, I was expecting more horror, and that was more of a gothic romance, which it worked. It worked as a gothic
oh,
romance.
totally. But after, as the follow up to Haunting of Hill House, I think we weren't ready for what it ended up being. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be something different. Then I
Yeah.
watched it again and tried to take it for what it is.
Yes.
And like, it's Mike Flanagan. He's going
Hmm.
to do good work no matter what. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Then he has the Fall of the House of Usher one coming out too.
that I can't wait. I'm just anything that he does, really. I'm not going to lie. Like, sign me up. Sight unseen.
Well, I don't know if you know, but Books in the Freezer is based off the joke in Friends where Joey is reading The Shining and it's too scary, so he puts it in the freezer. So we
I did
use
not
that.
know that. I love that. That's amazing.
So we use that as a scale to rate like how scary a book is. Like, is it a freezer book or is it a fridge book or is it a room temperature book? So what are some books you would put in the freezer?
Whew, I think the first one's probably going to be The Fisherman by John Langan.
Hmm.
Uh, it's gorgeous and so sad and so hauntingly written, but as a portrayal of grief and human desperation, it is fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Stuff that goes in the freezer. I mean, Motherfucking Sharks by Brian Allen Carr, like, rattled me down to my core. It's not necessarily horror, it's more bizarro, but there are moments in that book that are so unnerving that I had to sort of put it down for a little while. But as an artistic achievement, it's fantastic. If you haven't heard of Motherfucking Sharks,
No.
it is a story. It's kind of a western, kind of about a small sort of town that is beset by a magical plague of flying sharks. It's
Okay.
it's wild, but there's a moment in there that like Brian Allen Carr sort of interrupts his own book because in this chapter, a child is being pursued by, I think, a hammerhead shark. And Brian Allen Carr stops the narrative. He like kills the momentum. He's like, okay, hey, so I want you to stop and imagine the cutest kid in your life, the one that you know, the one that you love best. We're going to kill that kid together. It's on first read, it's haunting and uncomfortable. On second read, it's like, okay, I know that it's coming and I'm prepared and I can appreciate it for the artistic sort of stunt that is. I think stunt makes it sound cheap. It's not cheap. It's really well done, but it's absolute madness. Um, what else? Negative Space by B.R. Yeager is again super weird, but like unnerving and uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And I want to say Little Heaven by Nick Cutter is probably a freezer book for me because it is both existentially terrifying and blood and mayhem on a scale that I think most horror writers can only aspire to. Nick Cutter does cool, like does body horror better than almost anybody.
I remember I was reading that book and I was very into it, and my cat jumped on me like at a certain point, and I just jumped out of my skin. I was like,
Yep. Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah, it tracks.
she's around here.
Aw.
Well, I didn't know she was. I closed those closet doors and I didn't know she was in them, and I just heard her like clawing her way out.
I mean,
I'm like,
oh, hello.
yeah.
All borders are porous to cats.
Yeah. Are you working on anything right now?
So I am working on
On
sort
the
of the aforementioned horror western, but I'm also sort of plotting out the thing after that. It's probably going to involve an amusement park, kind of a rickety old amusement park
Okay.
here in Colorado. Growing up in what I call the Denver Metroplex. Denver itself is sort of a very small like municipal entity, but the suburbs around it are sort of this sprawling like metroplex of just different towns. So here in the Denver area, there is an amusement park called Lakeside, and it has been old and rickety since my mom was growing up in the 50s. So, but it's always been there. I grew up really close to it, and now I live very close to it. And there's something that's, again, it's kind of one of those elements that's always been in my head. I was like, this could be really cool to use in a story or a book. But I think I have an idea that's going to put the creepy old amusement park to work in a way that I'm really excited about. So those are sort of the two things that are on deck for me.
All right, well, that sounds exciting. So one thing we like to ask all our guests is for a chilling obsession. So what is something in horror that you've been enjoying lately?
I mean, I think it's probably a cheat to say anything John Carpenter, but the man is, I don't know, he's a god. He's never done any wrong, in my opinion. He's done some stuff that is a little not up to the level of like The Thing or Halloween, but honestly, I'm down for anything that John Carpenter does. Like music, like if he did a TV show, sign me up. Like music, movies, anything. Like, so that's I think a lifelong horror obsession. I think recently the most recent obsession that I've had is a book called The Orange Eats Creeps by Grace Pilanovich. Did you ever read a book called 300 Million by Blake Butler?
No.
Okay. It's a weird one, but it's sort of in that same very almost like psychedelic level of prose where it's hard to tell exactly what's going on or even who the narrator is or what the characters are about, but it's such a visceral and sort of unsettling experience from start to finish that it's impossible to ignore. And The Orange Eats Creeps is sort of kind of about a teenage vampire question mark, maybe a vampire, maybe just a sociopath, sort of roving the back highways of America searching for someone with like-minded predators, I guess we can call them, in tow. It's a wild book, and it's like 150, 175 pages long, but it's so dense that it's impossible to parse on the first read. It's fantastic and bug fucking sane and beautiful.
Interesting. Yeah, I had not heard of this.
It's it's a trip. Consider this your warning if you want to read it. It's real good, but if you get into it, you're like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. I don't know why I'm trying to read this. Like, yeah, I warned you. You're welcome.
You were warned.
Yep.
The other tradition we have on the podcast is to ask guests for their final girl song.
Ooh. Okay. I think I'm gonna go with Her Black Wings by Danzig because I love Danzig. I love Misfits, but I don't think they get enough for as much as like the Misfits and Danzig sort of made their career on like showing love to horror movies. Well, everybody loves the Misfits. I don't think there's enough representation in horror movies from anything from Mr. Glenn Danzig, New Jersey's favorite son. Um, so yeah, Her Black Wings I think is a fantastic like end credit song after like the police start swarming in or like everything has finally like everybody else is just dead. Yeah, that's a perfect like end credit song.
All right. Yeah, we will put that on there. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. It's an honor.
Of course, where can people find you online?
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram, though I'm terrible at social media. I'll cop to that right out the gate. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Cannibal Ghosts. Um, and yeah, I have a website, MatthewLyonsAuthor.com. I'm terrible at updating. So mostly social media, and even that is not great, but I do my best.
A Black and Endless Sky comes out March 15th.
March 15th.
I think by the time this episode comes out, everyone can go get their copy.
Go pick it up. Let me know if you love it. If you hate it, don't.
Keep it to yourself.
That's a real easy way to ruin an author's day is tag them in a negative review.
Yeah, that is.
Don't do that. That's poor
don't
form.
do that.
It's just rude. Anyway, thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, thank you. Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at BooksFreezerPod, on Instagram at Books in the Freezer, at facebook.com/booksinthefreezer, and on TikTok at Books in the Freezer. And you can always send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a few ways to do that. The first way is to become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com. There is a $1, $3, and a $5 level, different perks at each level. Also, they've recently rolled out an annual option where you just do like a one-time payment and you get all those perks for the whole year, which is pretty sweet. And I think you get a discount on top of that if you decide to go that route. You can also use the Amazon link that is in the show notes. You click that, takes you to Amazon. You do normal shopping that you would normally do, and a small percentage of that goes to help the podcast. Like recently, people have bought things like litter boxes and protein powder and memory foam mattress toppers. So, the possibilities are endless. Thank you again to all of you that utilize that. It's a big help. If you want a way to support the podcast that does not involve spending money, that is absolutely possible. One of those ways is to leave a review on a site like Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, like Spotify lets you do just a star rating. So anything like that gives the podcast visibility, boosts it a little bit. So again, thanks to all of you who have taken the time to do that already. And of course, just posting on social media, like posting on your story on days when the podcast comes out is a big help. But also just posting about the reading challenge, like when you finish a book and you've finished a prompt. I love being tagged in those when you let me know that you've, completed another prompt on your like Books in the Freezer reading challenge. So thank you again to all of you. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter at lady_Ganya. That's LADY_GAGNON, and on Instagram at That's What She Read, and that's with 2 A's. So see you next time on Books in the Freezer.